Good evening. I think we'll go ahead and get started. If you guys are ready, we're just 1 minute away from 5:30. I'm Dwayne Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Galveston Historical Foundation. We wanted to put together a couple of little programs. One today we'll do at 5:30, which you're here, and then tomorrow we'll do essentially the same thing at noon tomorrow, same location. Excuse me. We talk a lot about hurricanes in Galveston. We don't talk a lot about fires. We have had something we wanted to talk about. We need to get into this. And so this presentation today is a little bit stronger discussion of that. What are some things we might do in our residential buildings in Galveston? What are some options, how we might be better in the future? Following this very tragic event on 24th Street in Silkstocking Historic District. So we have several outstanding speakers, but before we do that, I'm going to say a couple of things. We have on our website, galvestonhistory.org, we've added a couple of publications. One of them is Fire Safety in Historic Buildings, put out by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, if you want to go access that another time. And buildingconservation.com. This is a fire suppression in historic buildings. These are all available on our website. We are working on a list of potential sprinkler system companies. We have some that we have worked with ourselves, but we're vetting those a little bit before we sort of publicly give those out there. I don't think we'll be recommending anybody or even necessarily recommending that you get fire sprinkler systems, but that certainly is going to be on the discussion today, and I think you may have some questions about that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the speakers and then let them come up one at a time, and then afterwards we'll do a Q&A. So if you'll hold your questions, we'll be happy to get into engage that. We have some distinguished people here with us today. Our Fire Chief Varela, you want to raise your hand over there. We have some other fire people here on the front row. I don't know your names, but welcome. And our speaker, Chris Harrison, who is Fire Marshal and Assistant Chief. He's going to be your first speaker. And our beloved Catherine Gorman, who sits on the front here, is our City Preservation Officer. The three of us, Chris, Catherine, and I met after the fire the week after to start thinking about some things that we might start doing. It's very important, I think, even though we have a long history in Galveston of fires, even recognizing this year the 1885 fire, which we'll talk a little bit about on Homes Tour. We'll do that before this fire came up. But others over the years. It's not unique to Galveston, but our unique historic properties, the context of many of our historic districts puts a lot of our buildings very close together and causes issues and things. Also, the older materials and some other things. So we're going to look at some options. We're going to talk about them openly. This probably will not be the last time we talk about this. But it is a start for us to begin the discussion and have a little bit deeper dive, as I said earlier. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Harrison, if you will come speak. I'm going to sit in the front row. There you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. As you said, I'm Chris Harrison. I feel I have to tell you that I'm a BOI. I graduated from Ball High School, much like the rest of the administrative staff here, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But I've been in the Galveston Fire Department now for 25 years, going on 26, and I can tell you that unfortunately I've seen a lot of things that I wish I hadn't seen. And one of those things is some of the devastation, not only of the loss of life, but also the loss of some of our heritage and some of our history. And so we're going to try to talk a little bit about that tonight. But I'll talk about the Galveston Fire Department first. In case you didn't know, we were founded in 1885. As you heard him just say, that there was a great fire of 1885. I would like to believe that the reason we exist is because of the Great Fire and the need for us to combat that. But we existed before the fire, and then about 40 blocks burned down, and we got better at what we did, and we continue to improve today. So today you are protected by 121 members. Of those members, 3 are the administrative chiefs. You have the Fire Chief Mike Varela, Assistant Chief Mike Mullis, and Assistant Chief Jared Hudson. They head up the operations divisions and all of the rest of the things that we do. In my office, I have 2 fire marshals that work with me, so there are 3 of us that cover the entire city. We have 2 administrative assistants, 111 suppression staff, and 2 medics on our mental health coast team. Those personnel work a 48-96 shift. across 6 fire stations that cover the entire of Galveston Island, and we run approximately 8,000 calls for service annually. We're here to talk about fire safety, but I want you to know that the men and women of the Galveston Fire Department, and I have to give this shameless plug, they are the best fire department in the state of Texas, arguably. And fire is actually about 5% of what we do. The rest of it is everything else that no one in the city can figure out how to do or what to do with it, and they call the fire department. And we gladly handle it. And I don't mean that as an affront to anyone. It's just that's what we are. We are about public service. So thank you for trusting in us. I'm going to start with this question. What is fire? Now, this is the book definition. It's a rapid oxidation process, which is an exothermic reaction resulting in the evolution of light and heat in varying intensities. All that says is, I have pictures. Remember, I went to Ball High. There are 3 things that are required for fire to happen: a fuel, heat, and oxygen. And when those 3 things combine in the middle, you get a chemical chain reaction. That chemical chain reaction is what we know to be fire. That is what we're here to talk about today, and that's what we're here to combat. So how do we put out fire? What do we do to extinguish fire? We can remove the heat, limit the oxygen, or we can cover the fuel. All of those things stop that chemical chain reaction, and that's how we put out fire. Now, I've provided some graphic aids here, but can anyone venture a guess as to what the number one way that we put fire out is, and using what medium? What do we use to put out fire? Water, right? It's abundant. It's efficient at what it does. It's not the most efficient thing, but it's what we depend on to put out fire. And we use a lot of it. So when we talk today about fire prevention and fire safety, we're going to talk about how to keep fires from happening, but we're also going to talk about ways that you can essentially bring that little group of men and women right there into your house and have them hang out with you 24/7. So this is some fire data. Now, I was telling someone in the back earlier that I'm kind of the geek of the fire department. I spend a lot of time in books and numbers, and I'll apologize in advance for that. But I talk a lot about fire safety and numbers, and so this is the American fire experience right now. And what you'll notice is that now these trends are about 10 years out. It takes a long time for fire data to be parsed because the majority of fire departments in the United States of America are volunteer fire departments. And not all of those departments participate in the system that gathers all of our data to give us a picture of the American fire problem. But when it does, we end up with trends. Now, you'll see that the number of fires is up 9%. The number of deaths, unfortunately, is up about 15 or 16%. The number of injuries is down, but our losses are going higher. And that's not just because of inflation. Now, you'll notice a little asterisk next to loss. Part of the losses that are included in here are a result of some devastating wildfires that happened both in California and in Hawaii. And if you think home prices are high here, try Hawaii on for size, you'll come back. But that's one of the reasons why those numbers are going up. Now, overall, if you stretch these trends out back 20 or 30 years, you'll see that versus then, we're getting a lot smarter about fire. But as a fire code official who is very interested in prevention trends, when we start to see a 10-year average of fires increasing and deaths increasing and losses increasing, that means that we're not doing something right. And you end up in a forum like this with me telling you things that hopefully you won't run me out of the room for later. So specifically on residential building fires, would anyone like to venture a guess of what the number one cause in America of fire is? And we'll narrow it down to residences. What do you think starts home fires? I hear wiring. I hear the kitchen. Space heaters, dryers. What if I told you this was not just residential? That those same numbers hold out about the same for commercial? Now, I'm not telling you to go out and eat all the time. I'm just telling you to be very careful when you're cooking. The majority of those fires there are unattended cooking. So we have busy lives, right? You start a meal. Maybe you come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and decided to start a meal. That happens as well. and then you go move on to something else or fall asleep. Next thing you know, that there's a fire. So almost half. Next is unintentional or careless fires. Now this number is alarming and concerning because this is not entirely an American thing, but this is mostly an American thing. We're one of the only nations where it's okay to have an accidental fire. I made a mistake and seriously injure or kill someone, and it's okay. And that's the reality of it. If you ever want to spend some time reveling in our carelessness, there's a young lady by the name of Vina Drennan, I think her name is. Her husband was a New York firefighter. Someone was moving in New York in and out of an apartment, left a pizza box on the stove, and the pizza box caught on fire. And her husband and two of his firefighters died. And it was an accident. And she has a hard time processing that. She's got a wonderful story, forgiveness and recovery. But that's another testament to kind of who we are as Americans. Now, you'll notice the discrepancy there. I'm going to give you the 4 largest causes of residential fires, but we went from almost half down to under 10%. Next one is heating. We'll talk a little bit about heating fires. And then after that, you're right around 7% of electrical malfunctions. All of these things are preventable, though, and that's why we're talking about them. And I hopefully give you enough information or pique your interest enough to where you can come back and ask us about them. So how can you protect your home? Now, we're going to jump right in, and I will apologize because I am going to suggest that you do something, and it's something that is expensive. But if we really want to know how to stop fires, the number one way that you can stop a fire from damage, the number one way that we can stop injuries, and the number one ways we can stop fire deaths in America is by installing fire sprinklers in a home. Now, I realize that is a very expensive proposition. And I think that there are some people that may have some information about that later or are working on something. But one of the very important things to remember is that I'm telling you how you can do it, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. And the reason I put the auto amendment in parentheses is if any of you follow the state legislature, he's now passed, but State Representative Otto in 2009, whose largest donors are the builders and home realtor associations in America and Texas, he floated a rider on a plumbing licensing bill. Now, if you know how the legislature works, there's bills and they all go around and shake hands and they get people to agree with their positions and then they get enough votes to pass the bill. Well, this particular bill covered plumbing licensure. The professional licenses it's required to be a plumber. But this little rider that was put on the end of it in September when the bill became law was retroactive to January. And in the state of Texas, it is now illegal for any municipality to require you to put fire sprinklers in your residence. So I heard earlier that, maybe we were going to come here tonight and tell you you had to do something. I'm telling you, you should. And it's a very good idea, but I'm also telling you that you are not required to because this amendment. Now, if like me, you disagree with this amendment, please feel free to call your legislators and have them change this. But I will also tell you good luck. It's been in law since 2009. There was a large push in 2017 to repeal it. And well, here we are still under the auto amendment. So number one way, install sprinkler systems. We're going to talk a lot about sprinkler systems, but I'm going to move past that right now. Second way is to install smoke alarms. If you can't have the fire be put out for you, you could at least be notified of it, right? Early warning and notification. Hurricanes. We are all familiar with hurricanes. We are all familiar with how in 1900, one of the reasons it was so tragic was we didn't know it was coming. Now you get up to the minute warnings and notifications. And if you're one of those people who likes to leave at the very last minute, you can choose to do so. I'd recommend you take some extra gasoline with you because as we see, that doesn't necessarily work out. But you can install smoke alarms in your home the same way to get early warning notification of a fire. There are different types of smoke alarms. There are smoke alarms that work on ionization or photoelectric. I won't get into the weeds with that, but suffice to say, there are many, many different types of technology. There are wireless smoke alarms. There are smoke alarms that will hook to your residential fire alarm if you have one of those as well. There are even beam detectors that can cover a room 4 times this size with just 2 pieces up on each wall that talk to each other. So there's lots of options there. But the big thing with smoke alarms is to test them frequently and make sure that they're working, they're properly spaced. And if you don't know how to do that or don't want to do it, frankly, you can call the Galveston Fire Department. I'll give you a phone number at the end. You can call that phone number. We will come out. We will check your smoke detectors for you. Don't tell the chief, but we'll even replace your batteries. Plug your ears. And if you don't have them, we will install them for you free of charge. We work with 2 partners on this program. One is the Insurance Council of Texas. The other is the American Red Cross. With the American Red Cross and with the Insurance Council, we'll only ask that you fill out a small form. It's a liability release, but then we'll come and do that for you, and then we'll come and check them. And that's how much these things work. Fire extinguishers are another way. What we're finding with the injury trends is, although that's where we're seeing that the injuries were down, what you'll see later is, and even in sprinklered buildings, we're starting to see more minor injuries in those fires. And the reason for that, and I'll go ahead and give the plug now, is because people are confident enough in a sprinklered building when there's a fire to go back in and fight the fire before the fire department arrives, and they're getting small injuries. Fire extinguishers is how they're doing that. I can talk for days about fire prevention. If there's anything you want to know about fire sprinklers, fire alarms, fire extinguishers, please catch me afterwards. I'm here 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. I have a city cell phone I carry on me all the time, and I'll gladly give you every bit of information you never wanted on any of these fire prevention tools because they work. The last way is electrical system upgrades. I'm sorry, not the last way, but on this one, something that is brought up time and time again, especially in older homes, is, well, I don't know what my wiring looks like behind my walls. Or I don't know, maybe the previous owner did some work, or maybe you're worried about the quality of the work that someone did. Have someone check it, but as you have them check it, and if there's something that you're worried about, there are technologies out there. How many of you heard of GFI plugs or GFCI plugs? They're usually near a wet location, right? And a lot of people think that that's good. That's going to solve all of my fire problems, because if something goes wrong, it's going to shut the electricity off. That's only for grounding problems. That's why you have them near wet locations. That AFCI is arc fault circuit interruption. Now you're getting into the walls and you're getting into contact or jumpers between the circuits. Now you're looking for arc faults that you can't see that are somewhere in the system, and that will shut the power off. And then another one is surge protection. I know we never have any issues with power around here when it's windy or raining or cloudy or a day that ends in Y, but surge protection can be a thing because it will knock down and send to ground all that extra voltage and current that's going through your lines. All of these systems can be installed on your current wiring. And to be honest, the number one reason that we hear for people not wanting to install these is because these stupid things that I put on there, they keep going off and shutting my power off. In my world, we call those clues that there's a problem somewhere that you should probably have someone go and look at. Now, I don't know about you guys, and I don't like electricity, and electricity doesn't like me. Electricity and water don't really mix. And electricity and knocking holes in walls and stuff don't really mix, because we get into things sometimes that bite us back. So anything that we can do to keep from having to deal with electricity, I'm all for it. But if you have a problem with your electrical system, a light switch that doesn't work, or man, I don't know, it just keeps my plugs keep going off. Maybe have someone come and check that, and then talk to them about some of these things that you can do here. And then having a plan. Enough can't be said about thinking about things before they happen. It's not pleasant. It's not something that we normally do. We're not wired to do it. How many of you have a security system in your home? How about home generators to keep the power on, or access to a generator to keep the power on. See, we tend to worry about the things that are directly in front of us. Like, we worry about our safety and security. I'm worried about my family at home, my wife and my daughter. Something going to happen to them when I'm not there to protect them. Are they going to have power when I'm at work dealing with some kind of other emergencies? But we tend to forget about what happens if my home catches on fire. What if there's an event like that? Is my family prepared to deal with that? Are we prepared to leave everything behind and get out and not go back in? We did a great job of this. I'm quite sure if you went to school in the United States of America, you remember doing fire drills. Am I right? Fire drills, you lined up, you walked orderly out of the building, you got outside, teachers made sure everyone was there, and then eventually someone told us we could go back in. Having done that over and over and over again, did you ever question yourself of why we do this because we don't have fires in schools? Was that ever a thought that ever crossed anyone's mind? We have hundreds of fires in the United States of America in schools every year. Hundreds. But hardly anyone is injured or killed because we have a plan to get out and we practice it regularly. And so that's a thing that you should have at yours as well. There are plenty of templates that they're available online. The United States Fire Administration, the Red Cross have a few, and I would just encourage you, work up a plan for your residents. If you need help, come and ask. We will certainly give you our 2 cents on it. Unfortunately, we've seen this a time or two. And so you should have a plan, and then you should practice it. Fire-rated construction is another one. One thing you'll notice in older buildings, one thing that we see, trends that make it harder for us as firefighters is buildings are closer together, and they're still close together. Now we do that with fire-rated construction. So we mitigate the distance between buildings. We use sheetrock, we use hardy plank, we use insulation. And so fires don't communicate from building to building, but in older buildings, they didn't have that down. They didn't have access to some of the technology we have now, and they just didn't have the knowledge or the materials to do it. So what you'll find in newer buildings is you'll find fire blocking and insulation. In older buildings, you don't find all that. You find a lot of good, seasoned hardwood. It's been there for a long time, just waiting to do its thing. And in the walls, there's what's called balloon frame over platform construction. Is anyone familiar with what balloon frame is? You'll have a void. So you have wall studs, right? And in balloon frame construction, typically you'll have a void, nothing in between, from the foundation all the way through to the roof. And so if something gets in those walls and it wants to travel like a fire, there's nothing to stop it. It has the run of the entire building all around before it ever shows. In newer construction, you have fire blocking in there. In addition to the sheetrock and everything else, there are fire blocks in there. So there's pieces of wood or other material that stop the fire from traveling, and it takes a while for them to burn through. And as it starts to emit smoke and things like that, you call the fire department, and we come in and we can expose all of that and find it. But in a balloon frame construction in older homes, a lot of times it's harder to do that because the fire may show in one place, but it may actually be, the seat of it may be in another, but it's had room to travel and plenty of oxygen. Remember, it takes oxygen to allow a fire to grow. So we had that there. Exterior windows, doors and windows, and then insulation. It was asked early on when we started talking about this, was there a way to insulate a historic residence the way that we insulate newer residences? And absolutely there is, but it literally is deconstructing a wall, insulating behind it, and then reconstructing the wall. As you can imagine, that could be quite the costly venture, and it could also potentially ruin the aesthetics or whatever. But where there's a will, there's a way. And so we list that as an option. I'm just aware that it might not be the best option. And then maintenance. All of these are systems, right? Everything in our home is a system, from the building itself to the wiring, the plumbing, the HVAC, even the things that you do inside of your home, the creature comforts that we have, those systems need maintenance. If they start to break down, call a professional in. You know, I'm not going to try to rebuild my roof, right? I mean, I'm sure I could probably mess that up pretty good, but the windstorm would disagree with me. Tax Department Insurance wouldn't give me a certificate. And then when something goes wrong, I have nothing but myself to blame. So I prefer to I save up the money and call a professional when I have an issue. Now, do you have to make a decision whether you want to do something that you wanted to do versus fix a problem? The joys of home ownership, right? Maintenance is a big key, and that's how you can protect your home. Now, I'll jump back on again, we talk about statistics. And we'll jump into kind of the meat and potatoes of sprinklers, if you will. But the fire marshal's office, I have to go back to kind of what we do. We're the only department in the city that fights fire. Because everyone, I mean, it's kind of in our name, right? And so that's what we do. And in the fire marshal's office, we get our way into buildings, as many as we can, and we inspect them. We try to catch issues at construction all the way through maintenance. Now, as you'll see from the statistics here, and this is a snapshot of 1 year, but this kind of holds true with the trending that we're seeing. You'll notice that apartment buildings we get into. Now, apartment buildings, most newer apartments are required to have sprinkler systems and fire alarms and fire rated construction and all of that. But when apartments were booming in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they weren't required to do those things. And many of those apartments are functioning just fine today. And you'll notice that 11% of the civilian fire deaths in the year 2023 were in apartments. Now, if we exclude vehicles, though, and we'll focus specifically on this one, non-residential structures. So read that as commercial structures. If the fire marshal's office gets into buildings and the fire department, we go and inspect these buildings and we, no pun intended, hold their feet to the fire of the fire code and make them do things. 4% of our deaths in America from fire happen in commercial buildings because they're held to a higher standard. But this one right here, that should scare you. It scares me. That's what keeps me up at night. That's what keeps the men and women of the Galveston Fire Department going. That's what we combat all the time. I will tell you that we will do anything that we can to bring that number down, including throw ourselves at the fire. And these guys and gals do it on a daily basis. But that number, that 68%, we cannot get into these buildings and tell you what to do. I can give you suggestions. I can give you great ideas. I can give you anecdotal stories of all the death and destruction that I've seen in the last 26 years. And it can go in one ear and out the other because there's no law that says that you have to do any of this. Now, there would have been, had there not been the auto amendment. Since 2008, in most cities across the United States, if they adopt a model code, you've been required to put sprinklers in your home. And what they found in places like Scottsdale, Arizona, and I still didn't look up that place. I think it was in Ohio. I apologize for not being prepared for that. But they enacted sprinkler ordinances in Scottsdale, Arizona. I think it was back in the 80s. And they saw subsequently their fire numbers drop for deaths and injuries and loss. They've retrofitted many of their older homes, but I can't tell you to, but I can tell you it's a real good idea. And I hope if you remember nothing else, remember that part, because that's the part that we're trying to reach through prevention. All right, I'll get off of that. Sprinklers and reported home fires. I told y'all, and I apologize again, I'm the numbers guy. I won't sit here and read all this to you. All I can tell you is a fire sprinkler in your home does way more good than not. And this second bullet point, that 68% that we saw, 1% of the total Not of that 68%, 1% of the total of fire deaths in the United States of America happen in sprinklered residences. 96% of those fires stay right where they're at when they started before we ever get there. And if you actually parse this data all the way out, over 3/4, if not closer to 90% of those fires are extinguished by one or two sprinkler heads prior to the fire department even arriving. And they use water. So let's talk about sprinklers. Does anyone have a story that they've heard about sprinklers negatively that they would like to share? No one? How many have seen a movie when it involves sprinkler systems? And typically it's your action movie where a guy wants to get somebody to come out of a hiding spot. He's like, I know what I'll do. I'll shoot the sprinkler right here and it'll drive that guy out of that room over there. It doesn't work like that. If you know, and again, I come by the office, we have coffee all the time, and I'll show you a sprinkler head and explain to you how they work. But essentially, each sprinkler head is a little firefighter. It's got a little glass bulb on it, and the temperature at that sprinkler head has to get to 155 degrees for that sprinkler head to go off. And it flows on average between 10 and 20 gallons a minute. And then if the fire grows, or it keeps growing, which typically they don't, we saw the numbers, right? Then the next little bulb pops and that one will go off and it contributes its 10 to 20 gallons a minute to it. And it only does that as long as the fire is growing. But typically what we see is less than 5 heads, and more likely it's 1 or 2, 20 gallons a minute. And in a little while, I'll tell you what a firefighter will do when we enter your house. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just what we do. So no, they don't all go off. Each one goes off on its own. Now there are sprinkler systems where all of them will go off. You find them in large warehouses that deal with hazardous materials and all. And we don't actually have any of those in Galveston. Sprinklers will leak and cause water damage. How many of you have plumbing in your home? Right? Residential sprinkler systems are installed with CPVC piping. It's a different color. It's orange because it's manufactured to withstand a little more heat and pressure, but it's the same CPVC piping that you have throughout your home now. It runs tandem with it right along, and it runs on the same water pressure as your normal tap that comes into your house. There's a possibility that given flow, you might have to upsize from a 5/8 inch meter to a 1 inch meter, which will cost you a little more. But it's the same piping. If you're not worried about your plumbing leaking all the time, then you don't have to worry about sprinklers leaking all the time. And if you happen to want to rip out the entire inside of your house and redo it, and you've heard of PEX tubing, there are systems in the United States now, especially in Texas, that allow a plumber to install a circulating sprinkler system to where the same water that goes to your faucet is the same water line that feeds your sprinkler system. It's planned by a sprinkler company, but it's installed by a master plumber. I have not seen one of those in Galveston yet. So feel free to be the first one and help me learn a little bit more about them, but it's an option. This one was puzzling to me, but this is something that I've heard many fire marshals say over and over again. And it kind of stems off of the sprinklers will leak and cause damage part. You ever gotten an important document or a picture or a rug or anything, your car seats? You ever gotten them wet? What'd you do afterwards? I heard dry, clean them, dry it out, right? We can't unburn anything. I wish I could. I wish I had a time machine. I wish I could undo all the things that I've seen over the last 26 years, but I can't. But we can dry out water damage. We can't dry out, or we can't unburn things and reverse fire damage. It just doesn't happen. Sprinklers are freezing in the winter. Again, I'll say if you're not worried about your pipes freezing, or maybe you are, there's ways to drain these temporarily. There's also ways to insulate them. The options are, there are dry sprinkler systems that will fill the pipe with air and hold back the water. There's antifreeze sprinkler systems. There's pre-action sprinkler systems that work in conjunction with the fire alarm. Where there's a will, there's a way for you to protect your house from sprinklers, or with sprinklers, sorry. Don't want to protect it from sprinklers. Touche. But they will absolutely not freeze in the winter if you maintain your system. And then there's the ever-present, well, I don't have to worry about it. In case you have a newer home or you've renovated your home and everything is new, newer homes are safer and I don't need sprinklers. Actually, what the data is saying, and one of the things that we see as firefighters firsthand, is newer homes are actually burning faster and hotter and more completely than older homes. Because older homes, as you know, were designed to breathe, right? They're drafty. Some people like that, some people don't. But newer homes, you burn something in the oven in a newer home, and you'll smell it for days, if not weeks, because they're nice and sealed up tight. We keep all that nice smoke inside. And then Americans, we also tend to subscribe to a theory called death before discomfort, because we like to be comfortable, right? We like big, plushy chairs and nice carpets and all that are made out of expanded oil byproducts that burn with thick black smoke and emit things like phosgene gas and cyanide gas and all that. So no, newer homes are not necessarily safer. Now, I'm not saying if you own a newer home, get rid of it and buy it. Look, you can make anything as safe as you want it to be. It's a function of how much you're willing to sacrifice to spend on it. But newer home, just because it's a newer home doesn't mean it's safe. All right. Oh, also, I have smoke alarms. You actually need both. I'll show you some statistics on that here in a little bit. So smoke alarms. We'll get off of sprinklers in a minute, talking about smoke alarms. We talked about how important they are. We talked about the fact that they will let you know that there's been a fire. 74% of all reported home fires had sprinklers in them. I'm sorry, smoke alarms in them. They accounted for 43% of this. In 16% of the homes that had smoke alarms in them, they didn't go off. But the reason they didn't go off is because we had either taken them down because those stupid things keep going off every time I sneeze, or I needed the batteries for something else. So we even tried to fix that as a public safety consortium. Now, if you get smoke alarms from the City of Galveston Fire Department, they come sealed with a 10-year battery inside of them. You literally can't take them apart to take the batteries out of them. Once we put them up on the wall and pull the tab, they're good for 10 years. To that end, though, if you happen to have hardwired smoke detectors or you have battery-operated smoke detectors, they are also only good for 10 years. They have a born-on date on the back of them. Take them down, look at the back. If they're past their 10-year life, get rid of them. Run down to Chalmers or whatever your favorite hardware store is and buy you a new contractor pack of them. And if you need help putting them up, except for the ones that are wired in your electrical system, because I don't like electricity, but we will help you install them. Now, to show you how efficient smoke alarms are, in half of the fires, 50% of the fires where there were smoke alarms present, we saw a lower death rate. That's a big number. Half is a huge number. What about that one? You add sprinklers to that equation, and again, I realize it's a large financial proposition, but the death rate per 1,000 is 90% lower. Please, make my job harder. Make us find other things for firefighters to do. Please. But the numbers don't lie. So, what should you take away from this? And I apologize, I see I've run way long. Catherine was right, I talked forever. Fire is everyone's fight. It's not just the fire department. I'm asking you to be an advocate. Consider some of the things that we've said. Talk to sprinkler companies. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to some of these people that own buildings that say, oh, sprinklers and fire alarms are going to ruin the aesthetics. How many have been to the Moody Mansion? Beautiful building, fully sprinklered. You ever visited First Presbyterian Church? Fully sprinklered. You can't even tell that they're there. Even in the fellowship hall where they have a tin ceiling because they centered all the heads. The Mansard House over on 23rd Street, which is now a bed and breakfast, fully sprinklered. There are just so many options out there, but the only way that we get this message out is if you help us and you just consider it. Again, no one's coming here to telling you you have to do anything. This is Texas. We're just close to the United States of America, right? And by God, we do things the way we want to. Your home is your castle. You do what you want. But there are ways that we can make it safer. You do have options. Sprinklers and smoke alarms are the best of those. And I can't tell you enough, if you've got a problem at your house, something that just doesn't seem right, something's not working right, or even a neighbor's house, go knock on their door and be nosy and tell them, hey, I noticed that light keeps blinking on the porch. Let me either help you change it or suggest an electrician to come and help you fix it. But talk about these things because there are ways that we can lower our fire risk in the city of Galveston, especially in our heritage properties that we want to protect. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Again, I know I could talk forever, but if you have any questions, we're right here at Central Fire Station on the 3rd floor. That's our address, 823 26th Street. If nothing else, we'd love to come by and give you the nickel tour and give you a free cup of coffee out of Jared's pocket. And that's the number there, 409-797-3870. I have cards in my truck. If you'd like one, I can go get it. It has my email address, everything on it. But please come by and talk to us or call if you have any questions. We would love to give you some more information on fire sprinklers and fire alarms. Are there any questions? Oh, okay. Questions all at the end. All right. Now you get to come and be nice.
Thank you, Chris. That was really valuable information.
You
I think that, when we're kids, we get a lot of fire safety messaging. And then as we get older, or if you're like me, you don't have kids, then that kind of messaging goes away. And it's really valuable to hear everything that Chris had to say about fire sprinkler systems, but then just fire safety in general. So I thank you for that. And I thank Dwayne for putting this together on such short notice and really recognizing what an important topic this is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about fire sprinkler system permitting, and then a little bit about some financial incentives that the city has that fire sprinkler systems can be a part of. So your first step, is that better? Thank you. I'm a little bit shorter than Chris. So your first step in getting a fire sprinkler system is to get a contractor. There are companies that specialize only in doing fire sprinkler systems. So you're not really going to be in charge of the permitting. Your contractor is going to do all of that work for you. But there's some things and some terminology that you should be aware of. So we're just going to go through some of those things. So the first step in designing a fire sprinkler system is a thing called a flow test. And a flow test is performed by our Public Works Department, and it measures the available water in your vicinity. It determines if upgrades are needed, like an increased water tap, a pump, or a tank to store the fire water. The pumps and tanks are more for commercial properties because they need a large amount of water, but it may be possible that you'd have to upgrade your tap. Another term that you'll need to know is backflow preventer. This is required on a fire water suppression line. And what it does is it prevents contamination of the city's water supply. So if it's a one-way valve, if there's a sudden drop in pressure, contaminated water could come from your fire line back into the city's drinking water. We don't want that to happen. It can be contaminated with rust, stagnant water, chemicals. So this prevents that from happening. Once you have one, it has to be inspected every year by a backflow inspector who specializes in fire suppression systems. This is a specialty that I did not know existed until a few days ago, but that is a person's job, is to inspect specifically backflow preventers on fire suppression lines. There will be several permits required. Those are all pulled here at the city. I work in the Development Services Department. We work with permitting every day. To get a fire suppression permit, you would get a plumbing permit. That's because you're connecting to the city's water line. And then you get a residential building permit for any of the work you have to do inside to accommodate the sprinkler system. And then you also get a permit from the fire marshal's office for the fire suppression system itself. There are fees associated with these permits. A plumbing permit, the minimum is $25. A residential permit is $300, and then the base fee for a fire suppression permit is $125. The real problem is when you have to get into upsizing your tap. So here are the water meter fees over here. 5/8 inch is a typical line for residential. If the flow test says you don't have enough water and you have to upgrade, you might have to go to an inch. And then you can see that the cost of that is $3,500. So that's significant and something that you should know is a possibility. Okay, so after the work is completed, there'll be a series of inspections. The Development Services Department will inspect the plumbing work and then also the residential work that was performed. The Fire Marshal's office will inspect the fire suppression system itself to make sure that that was put in correctly. And then this backflow preventer specialized inspector guy or gal will come and do a third-party inspection to certify that the backflow preventer was put in correctly. And you will also have to get your backflow preventer inspected on a yearly basis. The city maintains a list of everybody in the city who has a backflow preventer. We send out a notification. We have a list of these specialized folks. They perform their inspection, and then they give us a report to make and ensuring that it's working correctly. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about financial incentives. The city does not have any kind of program specific to fire sprinklers, but we do have one financial incentive in which fire sprinkler systems can be a part of, and that's the substantial rehabilitation for historic properties. So we'll go over that. This program was adopted in 2015 by City Council, and it's intended to encourage rehabilitations of our historic properties. In order to qualify, the building has to be either a designated Galveston landmark or contributing to a historic district. And I bet a bunch of people in this room have one of those designations. So raise your hand if you own a building in a historic district or one that is a designated Galveston landmark. That's a significant number of people. So this program is here and available for you all to use. It is for residential and commercial structures. The qualifying requirement is that the property owner has to invest at least 50% of the value in the property in improvements that improve the length of the building, the life of the building. The benefit is that you receive a 10-year freeze on your city taxes. And I have an example we'll go over, like a case study. And it is transferable to new owners. So in that 10-year period, if you sell the house, it can transfer on to a new owner and they can use it for the rest of its lifespan. Okay, so qualifying improvements, you have to spend the money that you're spending on the building has to extend the life of the building. So it's not things that are purely cosmetic. It's things that are structural, things like roofing, foundation, and siding work. But it's also your systems. So if you're upgrading your electrical system, plumbing, and HVAC, those are qualifying expenses. And that's where a fire sprinkler would come in. It would be a qualifying expense towards the participation in the substantial rehabilitation program. We can also count energy efficiency improvements and then also your own work. So you can count your sweat equity, you can pay yourself for the work that you're doing. Okay, and these are the steps in the program. The first step is called tax eligibility. You submit a form to the HPO, the Historic Preservation Officer, that's me, with a budget and a scope of work. So we review the scope of work and we make sure that the items are qualifying items, and then we review the budget to make sure that you're meeting the threshold. Then you go off and you do the work. There's no time period for that. You can take as long as you'd like. And then once you're done, you make an application with our office again, and that's called tax verification. And at that point, you are telling us you're done with the work and you've spent all of the money that you said you were going to. And you prove that to us with things like canceled checks, credit card statements, even like Venmo transactions. You just have to show that you have spent the money you said you were going to. And then the Landmark Commission reviews that. They make a recommendation to City Council. City Council approves it. And then we draw up a tax agreement. We take that to the Central Appraisal District and you file it with them. And then your taxes are frozen at the pre-improvement value for a period of 10 years. So let's look at this in real life. So this is a house. It's at 1808K in the Los Bayo Historic District. It just got certified for its completion in the program last Thursday at City Council. They applied for tax eligibility for that first step in 2023. And at that time, their house was valued at $340,000. But the land value is about $63,000. So you subtract that. We've got 277, divide that in half, 50% of the value of the structure, and that gives us the threshold to participate of $139,000. These folks well exceeded that amount, and they spent $234,000. And let's see what their benefit's going to be. So when they applied, their house was appraised at $340,000. In the 2 years since then, it's already gone up to almost $600,000. So for the city portion of their property tax bill, we will be using for the next 10 years the $340,000, and that won't change. For the other taxing entities, it'll continue to go up. But for the city portion alone, it stays at $340,000. So over 10 years, I estimate that the property owners, if they did not have the exemption, would be paying $25,000 in that time period to the city. Under the tax freeze, the program, they're paying $14,000. So they're saving $11,000. Did that pay for the project? No, it didn't. But is it worth filling out some forms and going to a couple of meetings and tracking your expenses? Yeah, absolutely it is. So that's something that the city has already that you can use if you're planning a large renovation, and also you could, if you're considering sprinklers, that could be an expense that you could use towards it. There's some other financial benefits that can come from installing sprinkler systems. For your insurance purposes, there could be reduced premiums of like 15% to 5%. The reduced risk can lead to better coverage and it can make the building more insurable. And then your insurance company may have a program that will reimburse you or give you a credit for the amount of money it takes to install a sprinkler system. Excuse me. And as Chris was telling us, there's such reduced fire damage cost that if you do have a fire, that a fire loss with sprinklers is so much lower than with homes without. So you have lower repair and replacement costs, you have a shorter recovery time, and then, importantly, you have fewer loss of your contents, the things that are really irreplaceable. So, and then it could just be that if you go to sell your house, you have a sprinkler system, people could find that really attractive. It could increase the building's marketability. So it could be marketed as safer, more resilient, and it could be really attractive to safety conscious buyers, people with small children, elderly people, people who are attracted to that. So that can lead to higher resale values. Okay, so here's my contact information. I am Development Services. We're in the Public Works Facility over at 30th and Market. It's all my contact information. So I'm happy to talk to you all about historic preservation or any kind of permitting questions that you might have. And then we'll give it to Dwayne to do questions.
Thank you both. Very happy to have you guys here. Very informative. We're going to take some questions. Raise your hand. We are recording this over here, so I'm going to repeat the question. If you address it to one of these speakers or whoever, the chief or whoever, we're happy to do that. We're going to record this. This will be available on our website as well. So, all right, first question. You're over here. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have two questions. My first question is, if you already have a sprinkler system in your yard with a backflow preventer that's for your yard, can that be utilized for your home?
Okay, Catherine, you guys probably just want to come up here, I think. All three of you come over here. So the question was, if you have an existing backflow for your sprinkler system, does that work for a fire suppression system, right? Okay.
I asked that very question of our backflow inspector, and she said no, that you can't, that they're totally separate lines.
So you have to have two backflows.
You'd have to have two backflows. Yeah.
And my second question is, 2015 HPO thing. And I've invested as much money as you're saying in my home for improvements. Is there any way to be retroactive on that?
Yes, so the question was, the asker is saying that she has owned her home since 2012, and can she participate in the substantial rehabilitation for historic properties even though she spent the money before she was certified into the program? And the answer to that is yes, you can. You can only count expenses that were incurred after 2015. So you can't account anything before the program existed because it didn't exist, but any expenses from 2015, I think it was in June, forward, you can. So if anybody feels like they're in that situation, please feel free to contact me and we can talk about it. And it's happened in the past that people have done that.
Harold. Okay, the question was, they were next door to the principal house that burned, but theirs burned as well. Would it have helped them?
Based on fire damage, yes. What happened there again was the proximity of the houses, and fire was able to travel in through the windows, through radiated heat, as well as in through the eaves in direct contact. While there would have been still some exterior damage and potentially some damage, say in the attic and all, a fire sprinkler system for residential is designed to protect the interior spaces of the home. And so you would have early application of water to that fire and consistent application until the water had been shut off.
Second question.
My second question is, and this is for Kevin. You talked about some help with crossing the sprinkler system. Is there any action or activity or thought of actually deducting the cost of the sprinkler system from the value of a home? When you're talking about the appraisal value.
So the question is are there any programs at the city that would deduct the cost of a sprinkler system from, say, your appraised value? The answer is no, there isn't anything currently, but you can always, contact your council members and say that there's something that you're interested in. And if there's enough interest at council, then a program could be developed.
Another question. Yes, ma'am.
So if you want to consider sprinklers, do you have to put them in your entire home?
Repeat the question.
So the question was, if you're considering sprinklers in a residence, are they required to be placed throughout the entire home? The answer is no. I'll talk about three main kinds of sprinkler systems. There's our NFPA 13, which is essentially a commercial sprinkler, which is the throughout, right? So it's made to protect the building itself and the people inside of it. 13D or 13, many people call it domestic, or 13R for residential, are for single family dwellings and multifamily dwellings. And so a 13D is what we would potentially be talking about for most of our single family residences, even up to and including, say, a 4-story or 3-story beach house. So large one. And they're only in the living spaces. So bedrooms, living rooms, kitchens. They're exempted from smaller bathrooms. So most bathrooms are exempt. Closets are exempt. Attics are exempt. Carports, even if you have parking underneath, is exempt. An elevator hoistway would be exempt. So one thing to remember is when the question about water supply, the same water supply that feeds your house is teed off of and a separate system, and that's where the backflow preventer is. That separate system is fed the same way that your water pipes in your house are. And the demand of that sprinkler system is included in the demand or added to the demand of your plumbing devices. And that's considered the size of the tap, but it's just domestic pressure up to and including 3. We have 4-story homes on the beach that are protected by 13D sprinkler systems at regular domestic pressure with a 1-inch meter. And we just don't see the fire losses that we see in unsprinklered properties.
Yes, sir.
Do the residential sprinklers have to be inspected by you every year like the commercial systems?
So the question is, do residential sprinklers have to be inspected annually by the fire marshal's office, just like commercial systems? The answer is no. Your home is your castle. You put it in. We ask that you not forget about it, and please don't turn it off if you do decide to put it. But no, essentially there are some water protection requirements and the backflow prevention requirements. If you're not familiar with them, you've heard of TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They protect our drinking water supply as well as our air quality. And since water in a sprinkler system, the majority of the time, the majority of sprinkler systems sits and kind of stagnates because it doesn't get used. We don't want that coming back into the water supply. I'll try to film it next time I do an annual test on a commercial sprinkler system. We do a flow on them. The water that comes out of there, it's smelly. It looks like oil. So no, we don't. We're not going to come into your house every year and inspect your home. We will if you ask us to.
Harold? Okay. Harold?
The chief,
Chief.
how often do you check the hydrants? Fire hydrants?
Fire hydrants in the city of Galveston. So actually, the Galveston Fire Department several years ago, Chief, I don't remember exactly when it was, we stopped doing the maintenance on them. So Public Works owns the hydrants. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but fire hydrants, we call them fire hydrants, but they're actually just cleanouts. If you ever seen when they come through and they turn them on every once in a while and the brown water comes out and then your washing machine and everything else. Anyway, it's a necessary function. Some enterprising firemen back in the day figured out that we could hook hoses to those and pull water out of them to fight fires. So we tested them for many years. And what we figured out is when it comes to maintenance and all that, that Public Works, who owns the hydrants, owns the water system, is better used to do that. So they have a team, the hydrant team. I'm going to lie to you. I promise I don't know the name of the team, but they start at one end of the island, they go to the other, and when they finish, they go all the way back and start again. And every year they touch most every hydrant on Galveston Island. They oil the bonnets, they clean the threads, and they flow them. And Public Works Engineering is the office that does that. And when they flow test them, there's actually a record of that flow test. And if you wanted to, you could request that information from Public Works Engineering.
So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you see a hydrant that needs maintenance. We have a good relationship with our Public Works, and we tell them, hey, work on this hydrant. They stop what they're doing, they get after it, and they report back to us.
That all the other things that I mentioned that earlier that the fire department does, checking hydrants that may be leaking is one of those functions. But if we find one, we report it.
Yes, I know this is a hard question to answer because it's so vague, and I apologize. What is the general cost for us if we were to put in a sprinkler system for, say, 1,000 square foot house? And the second follow-up to that would be, is there any financial assistance for senior citizens?
So the question was, any financial assistance available for installation of sprinklers, and then approximately the cost. I will tell you on the cost that it varies widely. A lot of it just depends on the company that you hire. On average, I think the last time I did a calculation on it, on the average large beach house. So we're talking massive structures.
1,000 square feet. That's a small house. I'm just curious. You want to divide your big house by whatever.
Yeah, it's hard to say with the way material costs are these days. Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, I believe, had a cost estimator on their website, but again, it varied widely. But on a large beach home, I know it was, you were talking in probably the $15,000 range, around $15,000. No, this is no large beach residence. Commercial, way higher. Multi-story.
And then the second, financial assistance.
On financial assistance, unfortunately, I don't know of any economic incentives other than what Catherine mentioned potentially earlier with the city programs, and then any insurance cost savings.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
What about grants?
Yeah. The question was, what about grants? And again, I don't know of any. The only thing that we have at the city is our one program, and then these more sort of intangible financial benefits.
I believe it was the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. Yeah.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So I don't know if this is beyond the scope of this meeting or not, but a lot of us are here because everybody got scared after this fire. And we all assume a certain amount of risk when we live in a historic home that we know is a mere 12 inches or 24 inches away from the next property. One of the things that still perplexes me, and this might, again, be outside the scope of this, nobody really has come out with any information as to why did this fire start in the first place? Are we scared because somebody created a fire in their kitchen and was just stupid or I guess I'm trying to get at more of the visceral part of, we'd all like to put sprinklers in our house, but the reality is, I live in a house that was built in 1906. I don't even know what would be involved to put that through the walls and the roofs and the attic, and I can almost assuredly tell you it would be more than $15,000. But beyond that, I think from a community standpoint, we're all kind of sitting here treading water, like, why did this fire happen? Was it electrical? Was it? And again, that might still be under investigation, but I think a lot of us are scared, and maybe we don't need to be as scared as we are.
Sure.
Because how often does it? I know the fires, and I can't even imagine you sitting in this room. So please understand how heartfelt we all feel for you, but how often do we have these fires? How scared should we be? And I'd just like to know more about what happened.
Through her first question, if it wasn't obvious, if you can tell us without betraying a confidence that you owe to the owners of the Ball Mansion, did you determine the cause or causes or possible causes?
So we did, as part of the investigation, we determined that there were several potential causes that we could not rule out. I can tell you that we do not believe it was arson. We do not believe it was arson at all. What it will officially be determined as the Galveston Fire Department, it's a category called undetermined. And what that means is we can't categorically rule out one and say it was the other. I can tell you that there are currently private investigations going on as part of their insurance. Insurance carriers hire fire investigators to try to determine whether or not their loss can be subrogated. I can tell you that they're looking at some of the building systems right now. And I really, that's really all I feel comfortable saying. But I can say that the fire started in a portion of the home that does not meet the standard definition of what we see as causing fires typically. So this wasn't a cooking fire.
So no smoking gun was obvious.
And this wasn't a smoking fire. This wasn't anything like that. What we have here is a building systems fire.
I saw pictures of the attic of that home before the structure was completely burned, and it looked like it was coming out of the attic area at the top of the structure. From the pictures that I have a friend that was showing me that was there.
Sure. So the comment was made that there was fire seen coming out of the attic. That's a function of the balloon frame construction that we talked about earlier with no fire stops. The fire started closer to the ground. Yes, ma'am.
Can you potentially put fire-resistant materials in between, like spray foam insulation that would be not as good as a sprinkler system, but may help you as a fire retardant for somebody who maybe wants to do something but is not willing to fully embrace a full sprinkler system in their house? Where's the gray area?
So the question was,
Is there a gray area that we can do some things to be proactive without necessarily fighting on a full sprinkler system where we have to rip up walls in our house?
so the question revolves around building construction, potential building construction mitigation of fire hazards. Yes, there are ways to do that. I think you will find that the intrusiveness of trying to get into your interior wall spaces is just as much, if not increasingly more, than trenching for a sprinkler system going between joists and things. So there are options. It's just a function of how much money you want to spend on it.
Do some of your staff have the ability to talk to us about some of those other options?
The question was, does my staff have the ability to talk about some of those we can certainly give you some options to talk to a building professional about, but that would be more in the realm of a building professional, like a contractor, because it's going to involve the International Residential Code and things like that. It will be building permitted work. And so there are other things besides just the fire safety portion that you would need to consider. Yes, sir.
Catherine, will hardy plank be available for us to use on our house?
So
Is it effective? Is it one effective fire retardant?
So the question is, would hardy plank be available to use on a historic house? And is that an effective fire retardant material? The answer to the fire retardant is yes, absolutely it is. It's more fire retardant than wood, for sure. The use of hardy on a historic structure requires review by the Landmark Commission. So I can't say definitively yes or no, but that is something that could be requested. Especially since your work will be so extensive, it might be something that they would be more lenient about. Hardy plank can be used without any special approvals for board and batten siding. You know, that's the siding that goes around your skirting. You can use hardy board, a smooth textured hardy board, as your backer for board and batten without any special approvals. So that is already available. And then anyone can request the use of hardy to the Landmark Commission if you have a historically designated house. If you don't have a historic house, you can do whatever you'd like. But we would always recommend that you use the smooth texture.
One last question. All right, guess what?
I restored it. I had all electrical. I had PEX pipes put in. I have wired smoke detectors. I have put the hardy plank on the bottom. It's not a historical designation. What else do I need to do to ensure my safety in my home?
So the question, if I understand, is it a newer renovation home and that has some of the many upgrades that we've talked about, and what additionally can you do? Maintain your systems. Have your system.
Does that mean I can call you guys and say, come to me? That's what he said you could do. That's what he said.
We could the Galveston Fire Department will certainly, I could send out an inspector from the fire marshal's office to come and walk through your home and give you tips and things that we see that we may have seen before that can either cause a trip, slip, fall hazard or a fire hazard. Absolutely, we'll do that for you. But other than that, for anyone that has that same question, it would be just continued maintenance of systems and then human behavior items. Don't burn candles near drapes. Don't leave cooking unattended. Things like that.
My smoke detectors are immediately above the kitchen, and I can't even use all of the burners at one time because they all go off. So that's not an issue.
Well, please don't ever take them down because they're a nuisance. We will help you.
No, they have, some of them have batteries that I have to have replaced, and
One last, okay.
Just real quick before we move on that, and I know sometimes we miss it, and we always utilize it with kids when we talk about fire prevention, is have a plan. You're never too old to have a plan. I still do it. My wife thinks I'm silly sometimes, but I make everyone in my family open windows just to make sure they can still open them. They understand how to unlock them. You know, when's the last time you've opened a window? I make them do it, you know, and just have a plan. Correct. So that may be correct. So that may be something maybe that's a small renovation that we start off with. Let's make sure the window's open, right? So let's start small. And that's one of the small things you do. Hey, make sure you got exit. Those are all exits. Make sure you have them. That's a small thing you can do that, you don't have the $15,000 monster, right there. So that's one thing you can do. But that's just back to that. Just have a plan. I think we forget about it sometimes. So that's one thing I just wanted to add to Chief Harrison.
One last thought.
Yeah, I just have a couple of items that you didn't mention, fire suppression. What's your opinion of fire blankets and these canisters that you put over your stove?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So the question is a couple additional items. Fire blankets, they work. We still use them in laboratories and schools. We still see them in kitchens. We actually use them for electric vehicles. It's a much larger, heavier, more expensive version of a fire blanket, but fire blankets work. They smother the fire, right? It's the same principle as us spraying water and creating steam. It takes the oxygen away from it, fire goes out. The fire stop, I think, is one of the canisters you're talking about. If you have a hood over your kitchen appliances, stove, thank you. There are small canisters that include essentially what's inside of a fire extinguisher in them. They're magnetized, so you just pop them right up on the hood. They stick there. You take them down every once in a while, clean them off, whatever. They're kind of hard to beat up, too bad. But yes, those work. Now, is it the end all be all? No, but with cooking being the issue in the United States of America, it certainly can't hurt. Thank you for bringing that up. We actually had a recent renovation of a high-rise project in the last few years downtown. And one of the things that they did, besides retrofitting with sprinklers and some other things, was they put 2 of those in every apartment underneath the range hood.
Those are manual extinguishers?
Yes. It's a set it and forget it. It's a small, it almost looks like the old Jiffy Pop container. It's a much smaller version, and it's got the same weak seam on it, like a foil. And if it heats up enough, like say you have something catch on fire because you've walked away from the stove, it burns through that bottom part and releases the chemical.
So it's self-releasing? It's not
Yeah.
manual.
I'm sorry, it's automatic.
When that hood
Yes.
above the stove gets hot enough, those things pop.
Yes, but it won't call the fire department for you. And it may only smother the fire, which may reignite, which means you would need to go catch your fire extinguisher if you're feeling froggy that day, and then help us out. I want to say it's a fire stop canister. Yeah, I will get that information and have Marissa put out a list of things that we've talked about. The PIO.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. They are here to ask you some more. You can talk to them. Yes, these are available on our website. You can get to them at galvestonhistory.org, and there's this fire, it says a fire safety program on it. So we're going to wrap up. We will do this again tomorrow. You can ask them some more questions. I'm sure we have a lot more work to do on this. I think there's a whole lot of questions that came up. We need to look for some incentives to make this more attractive, folks. Thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate it. Tomorrow at noon.